Okay, we got when does difficulty become a problem from MH Swooker, I think. I hope I said that right. Okay, let me see.
After playing Celeste, I became obsessed with difficulty in games. Despite that fact, nearly all of my favorite games from the past decade have
Oh shit, let me see. We got Zelda, never played Rise. Yup. Never played Spider-Man, Grand Blue. Nope. 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 Wilds. Yup. Many hours.
been on the easier side. And that got me thinking, does
Easier.
difficulty even make games better? Okay, so there are two enormous benefits to high difficulty in games, but
It depends on the game, I think. I would say knee jerk. Kind of. Because, I don't know, it depends. Or like, it depends on the game, it depends on the audience, it just depends. I mean, I wish I could say it I wish I could give a more clear-cut answer, but it just depends.
they're both double-edged swords, as if they're not used correctly, things can quickly fall apart. Let's use
Right.
Dark Souls for the first one. In my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3, I ran
Bro, I haven't played any Dark Souls games. Like 1, 2, or 3. I've played like Souls likes. Like the Elden Ring, Fires of Rubicon, a couple others, but yeah, like they're all great.
into these knights in the second area of the game. Now, in most games, you do not remember the foot soldiers from the second area of the game, and why would you? They don't put up any resistance at all, and by this point, you've probably learned enough about how to play that you're not still fumbling.
Oh yeah, Dragon's Dogma 2. Man, I played this and it was just like okay. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst. As far as difficulty in the game, I thought I don't think it was too difficult. I mean, I think the learning curve was like all right. But then again, like when does difficulty become a problem? It's like also you could ask the question, when making something more difficult, what makes things difficult in a game? You know, because what one person might think is difficult may not seem difficult to another person.
Around with the controls, but these knights were different, very, very different. I approached the first one and thought, yeah, he's a bit bigger than most normal enemies, but who cares? That sword looks cool. I want to see if he drops it when I.
Oh,
I'll just run back real quick and. Okay, what's going on here?
yep,
I
you
was
just gonna get
genuinely
got.
confused, and eventually I came to the most logical conclusion I could. Oh, I get it. That's just a mini boss. I'll avoid that until I get stronger, and then. You've got to be kidding me. Something interesting happened when I started to defeat these normal enemies, though. Much like the more challenging bosses I had faced before Dark Souls, I began to learn and memorize their attacks, their animations, and the tools at their disposal in a way that I really didn't have to for other games. This is the first positive quality of high difficulty. It can force you to gain a deeper appreciation of the game itself.
Yes. And this is the part where, like when playing Souls-like games, this is a major like core gameplay loop. I think it is part of the core gameplay loop to actually see an enemy and know its moveset before he's about to like do a move. Because what ends up happening with like Souls games is that you see an enemy, you go up to him, and like maybe the enemy is designed to like fall over in a couple of attacks, and they only have like one or two different ones. But if you like walk up and do absolutely nothing, well, that enemy probably will kill you. But you know, if you look towards like the more intermediate level enemies, you actually have to have like almost this hologram of movement of what the enemy is going to do. But you only get to see that and like imprint that into your head after having fought them a couple of times. Whereas I think a lot of like older games, it was more it wasn't like, it's because of like the poise system or like hyper armor that a lot of enemies have. You know, a lot of the older games, like the moment you hit like an enemy, they just go into like hit stun or they get juggled or whatever. And I mean, but like that's like a whole different style of, well, not a whole different, but like kind of like a different style of game, of like action combat versus like Souls like. Um, so I mean, it just it depends on like what you want out of the game, what kind of experience you want out of the game. Some people like seeing an enemy and seeing it, all of its moves, all of the animations that went into like making that enemy move set, and just completely figuring out all the punish windows in it, almost like a dance, like a choreographed dance. Some people like that, but other times, people like memorizing their own moves, memorizing they're able to string, like this attack can chain into the next attack, that can chain into the next attack, and combo them and everything. Like there's a skill around that. Um, it's like you either have to memorize the enemy's moves and get around them, which is like a Souls-like brand, or action combat, like Devil May Cry or something, where you have to memorize your own moves and just get a good hit in on the enemy to put them in like a combo state or whatever. So it's just, I mean, but again, like the difficulty aspect of it, I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for out of the game.
I don't know how an early game enemy from an easier game behaves, it really doesn't matter. I don't have to know. The game
No.
isn't going to punish that lack of knowledge. In more challenging games like Dark Souls, on the other hand, failure to learn will result in an inability to progress. Now, I won't pretend this is purely positive. It's very possible, likely even, that players will just bounce off of games like this due to it feeling too abrasive too early in the game.
Yeah.
In fact, that's exactly what happened to.
And what Dark Souls, I would imagine, conditions you is to have an adaptive mindset. Because the attacks that you're doing, they're not as they're just like, you don't really do combos. Like, yeah, you can have like some multi-hit like chains or whatever, but it's like 2 or 3 attacks or whatever. Very rarely do you get more than that. But like for the most part, you're like light attack, heavy attack, maybe a jumping attack, and that's about it. Whereas the enemy has a more diverse move set that you have to memorize, more or less. You defeat them, and then you have to look and go find a new enemy and relearn their entire new moveset. So you are constantly having to adapt to every new enemy.
Me when I first played Dark Souls 3. Once you do put in that time and effort though, and properly learn these enemies and their attack patterns, not only is it immensely satisfying, but you become far more invested in each encounter. The second quality is a bit more wide-reaching though, so we're gonna need 2 games. First, a small-scale example, then one that extends to the entire world of the game itself. Starting with the former, this is Bloodbath Diablos. It's a boss from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, yes, that's the actual title, and saying it's challenging would be quite the understatement. It's got this miserable combo that feels borderline unfair, yet it's in this underhanded tactic that we're actually told a story through the gameplay. Let me show you. So the lore of Bloodbath Diablos is that it's a normal Diablos that had an encounter with hunters like yourself in the past. It was badly injured in that encounter but managed to survive, and that's why one of its horns looks like this. The monster didn't just leave that encounter with some scars though, it left with something even more important. Knowledge. Bloodbath has learned what works and what doesn't. It understands the monster hunters and what they're capable of. It's figured out that when it roars, the hunters are stunned for a moment. So fighting based on its past experiences, it'll roar to first stun the player, then instantly charge straight at you before you have the chance to move. This combo is extremely difficult to avoid if you're not ready for it, and ironically enough, if you don't have your own experience with this monster and what it's capable of, you'll have a much tougher time defeating it.
Damn, I haven't played GU, but I would imagine that shit is fucking frustrating. Oh, 100%, dude.
A large part of why this is one of the most challenging fights in the game, and this combo in particular does feel genuinely unfair the first time you see it.
Yeah, and what matters is the first time. Much the same way, whenever you like watch a movie for like the first time ever, it's the first initial viewing that matters the most. Your initial impressions of it. Because, the monster's gonna roar, we'll just put earplugs on and call it a day. Like, that's the easy counter to it, but you don't really know that. Like, if this is like your first time playing a game like a Monster Hunter game, or this is the first time you're fighting this monster. You just don't know what the monster's capable of.
I mean, the boss is hitting you with this enormous AoE stun only to follow it up with a potential one-shot. But that's the key here, it should feel unfair. For the first time, that knowledge that you've been taking advantage of is now being used by the monster too. Think about it, in Monster Hunter you can bring flash bombs to stun flying monsters and knock them out of the air, sonic bombs to stop them from burrowing under the ground, and the perfect element to exploit their greatest weaknesses whenever you get the chance. Having the tables turned on you like this and seeing this monster exploit its unique advantages doesn't just create a far more exciting boss fight, it tells a story as well. A story of a monster that's furious you would even try to fight it, a monster that's done this song and dance before, and perhaps more than anything, a monster that's out for revenge. That's only one boss though. What if the entire world was designed around this idea? Well,
but I think what also plays a part into difficulty for a lot of these games is how well the game tries to coach the player into playing the way that the game developer intends for you to play. I mean, because once a game like is out of the developer's hands and it's like out there in the public, the developer can kind of put little guardrails in the game to have them like, oh, you're gonna play like however you want, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're still going to be playing the game, but if we can kind of like coach you into playing like this way and to becoming more adaptive instead of so rigid, like in like some Dark Souls game, everyone like there's some people that like just want to play with like one big two-handed sword, all points into strength and all that jazz, and that's how I'm going to play the game. No adaptation, no nothing, and that's just it. And you take that kind of player, and then you can like look at like a more adaptive type player, and you put them both up against the same problem. They're going to have like two different experiences coming into contact with like a boss or whatever. Somebody that is so, what do you call it? Like stubborn, or not stubborn, but like stringent, and I'm going to beat this boss my way. It's my way or the highway, versus like this other guy that's going to like potentially just counter build every single enemy and make it like the boss seem very trivial if they can. It's just two different experiences, but like once the game, like I said, once the game is out there, players are gonna play however they want.
Then you'd have what may be my favorite game of all time, Xenoblade X. Xenoblade X takes place a few decades in the future. Earth is gone and the final remnants of humanity have crash-landed on a planet called Mira. One of the major themes of this game is how dangerous this planet is. In most of the side quests, and of course through the main story, you're constantly reminded of this fact. But where X takes things a step further is in its ability to actually display this danger through the gameplay. There are hundreds of enemies throughout this world that will have absolutely no trouble dropping your HP bar to 0 long before you even realize what just happened.
Dang.
One wrong step and you'll find yourself in a cave surrounded by bugs the size of large dogs, each of which are twice your level and extremely aggressive towards intruders. Perhaps you'll be fighting one enemy only for another one to introduce itself and instantly wipe your entire party. Or my personal favorite, maybe you'll fast travel and spawn next to a level 92 walking volcano with 4.5 million HP. All of these seem comically unfair in the moment, especially that last one, but they exist for a reason. Mira isn't supposed to be safe or predictable or comfortable. It's supposed to be so outlandishly dangerous that entire squads of elite soldiers get wiped out from just a bit of bad luck. Furthermore, levels can be deceiving as well. A level 10 enemy may seem weaker than you if you're level 15, however, if that level 10 enemy is more than 20 times bigger than you, its stats are going to represent that. Predictability is not a privilege awarded to the player on Mira, and it shouldn't be. This forces the player to learn and adapt much like other challenging games, and not just to the bosses, but to the world itself. As you learn, you start to treat the world with the respect that it deserves. You'll think to yourself, oh wait, I can't go there, that's the territory of this super powerful monster and I don't want to bother it. For 95% of this game, you don't master the world and bend it to your will. You learn, you adapt, and you work around it. There's this idea of ludonarrative dissonance in games. A boss will be touted as the most powerful fighter in the city only to lose to 3 water type attacks, or a character will absolutely refuse to kill anyone no matter what in the story and then do this to the first foot soldier they see in the gameplay. However, I think the often overlooked mirror to this, ludonarrative harmony, can create some of the best experiences in games. Xenoblade X is a masterclass in ludonarrative harmony. If you knew nothing at all about this game's story, you'd still feel the exact same way that all of these characters do each time they leave the safety of the city walls.
Yeah, I mean, I never played this game, and that's kind of like what I feel. Like, you have like your level, but you also have the size of the monster. So it's like there's a lot of variability in what that enemy can do. So, huh.
You'd feel that tension everywhere you go, not knowing what lies around the next corner or what monster is lurking just out of sight. Even as you gain these upgrades and get stronger, so powerful that you begin to feel invincible, the game is quick to put you right back in your place. If this game wasn't willing to beat you down so one-sidedly, that immersion would totally vanish. The world would feel safe, predictable, and under control. But it's not, and that's explicitly because of the almost unfair difficulty on display here. Yet, much like Monster Hunter and Dark Souls, this is gonna be a bit abrasive to some. If you want to go sightseeing and explore the fields in search of some cool stuff, the game will actively stop you from doing that if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mira is a truly beautiful world, yet behind each stunning vista may lurk a colossal titan that'll happily cut your sightseeing short. Equally frustrating, you may find yourself up against a boss, feel like you're finally figuring it out, and right before you finish it off, a weapon to surpass Metal Gear shows up and simply decides that you lose. Now, despite the potential negatives, I'm still
This is the thing that I don't know if I like it or I hate it. You know, you play like some of these open world games, and some of the games will have this like underlying system of everything is scaled to the player's level. So it'll, whatever enemy you come across, it'll just be like X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus 3. And X is just going to be like whatever the player's like level is. So there's always going to be a sense of like, it's never, whenever you level up, it's never like, it never feels good. You're just like always struggling, more or less. But, and then you have like the opposite of that system where depending on the zone that you're in, you could like wander off somewhere where the enemies are like really hard, or you could stay around like the early zones and like kind of like farm your level up a little bit so that when you go to like the next zone, it's not as tough. Like the enemy levels are just like fixed, or something like that. But I don't really know which one, like me personally, like I like, as I think there's pros and cons to both of them. And it's, I don't know, I've never really thought about which one was better. It's just if the game can like make it feel good, then I'm okay with it and I don't really care.
A pretty big fan of high difficulty in games. Perhaps you have your own stories, but personally, a lot of my most memorable moments in gaming have been from a direct result of high difficulty. Finally overcoming that grueling platforming gauntlet, landing the last hit on a boss that I've been stuck on for hours, or perfecting my build and executing my plan just as I had drawn it up. I'll never forget those moments. So without something like this at their disposal, what exactly is it that keeps me coming back to these less challenging games? What do they have that makes up for that lack of difficulty? Well, let's find out. So here's the plan. I decided to take a closer look at 3 different easy games. One that I haven't played before, one that I've played a few years ago, and one that I regularly replay. In doing so, I was able to find a trend that in hindsight seems incredibly obvious, yet I still believe it's an extremely important point that's often forgotten in discussions about difficulty. Quick disclaimer though, while I call these easy games, that's extremely subjective, as is all difficulty to some extent.
Yeah.
If, for example, you took someone who's only ever played games like Minesweeper and Tetris, they would probably struggle quite a lot with Monster Hunter. Equally, however, if I tried to play a game like Tetris or Minesweeper, I would find it incredibly challenging to reach the level that people familiar with these games play at. This is less about objectively easy games and more about playing games that don't challenge me specifically to see what I still enjoy in them in the absence of that difficulty. In doing so, we can find out if difficulty would make those games, and by extension games as a whole, better. Make sense? Cool. Let's start with Kirby. I did not think I would enjoy Kirby and the Forgotten Land anywhere near as much as I did. I played a ton of Kirby games as a kid. I even remember doing pseudo speedruns of Squeak Squad to see if I could beat the whole game in a single long long car ride. However, somewhere along the road, I eventually stopped playing Kirby games for one reason or another. So with my previous experiences in the series, along with this newest entry in Forgotten Land, I figured it would be the perfect game for the test. The most significant thing I noticed here was progression. Every game has some level of progression. In Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, you level up and learn new attacks. In Monster Hunter, you get new gear and fight bigger monsters. On YouTube, you gain subs when people press this button. And even outside of video games and things like sports, each individual match progresses based on certain factors within the sport. The amount of effort necessary to achieve that progression and the form it ultimately takes is going to vary dramatically from game to game. In something like Dark Souls, the vast majority of your progression comes from your ability to play better, and that can be a bit more subtle and not immediately apparent. You may
the whole get good or play better type of thing. I mean, that's like a very generalized thing. Like if you were to tell someone that, well, they're just going to come back with like, well, how? Okay, well, here's how you do it. Whenever he does this move, dodge it at this angle. That way he'll end up on the other side and you'll completely avoid the attack. And then you can get a light attack in. Okay? But that's like the direct way of saying how to do the thing.
Lose to a boss 50 times and the health bar may not get lower with each subsequent attempt, yet you are undeniably getting better and by extension, progressing. On the opposite extreme, you have a game like Cookie Clicker where your progression is both immediate and obvious. You literally watch as this number goes.
Oh yeah, that game, the Cookie Clicker. the game where all you do is just click the cookie.
Up. Every action you take leads to visible progression in the game. This is part of why I think progression in more challenging games is so satisfying. All of that progress is released in one single moment. Now, Kirby is obviously not on the level of Cookie Clicker, but its progression is still extremely consistent. First, there are the Waddle Dees. You need to collect them to access each boss, and you gain them from completing stages. However, if you want, you can also get even more of them by completing specific tasks within each stage. These can occasionally be a little harder than merely reaching the end of the stage. Still, a lot of the time, they're as simple as eat some snacks off of tree stumps. These Waddle Dees will build up the town in the early game and unlock challenge levels throughout. These are special bonus stages that grant you the second major form of progression, rare stones. These stones let you upgrade your copy abilities to newer, stronger forms. The bomb, for example, turns into the chain bomb that can link multiple bombs together for larger explosions. These upgrades aren't simple damage increases either, they actively change the way you play the game. Finally, you've got the variety both in the stages and the abilities that you can use. The new ability to turn into anything from cars to metal pipes is explored brilliantly. These allow for astonishingly unique styles of play that constantly have you asking what kind of wacky segment could be waiting for you around the corner. You'll see an arch and think, what is that supposed to do? And suddenly this Kirby game turns into a game about gliding through the air.
What
then
the
you'll
hell?
see a metal pipe that'll turn it into a 2D auto-scroller. Even the copy abilities have their own outlandish
Oh my god, you're playing Katamari Damacy.
ideas, like the spikes emulating Katamari Damacy.
Yeah.
I think ultimately that's why I enjoy this game as much as I do, in spite of the lack of difficulty. It's so much fun to see what waits for you around the next corner and what tricks the developers are going to pull out of their hats. That, along with the constant and stable progression, makes for an adventure that feels like pure concentrated joy. So would difficulty make this experience better? Let's imagine you can increase it in a way that doesn't feel boring and artificial, like simply scaling up the numbers.
Would difficulty make the experience more enjoyable? It depends. How? Well, probably this game isn't really meant to be like a difficult game. It's just simply like not meant for it. You make the game more difficult? I mean, yeah. I mean, just like whatever thing you're doing, like with that little glider thing, you could just do a bunch of shit with it. Like you could add like a time attack on it. Like, can you get through the course with more speedy of a time? Can you get through the course without getting hit? Can you collect all the things on the course? Or however it is. I mean, I haven't even played this game, but there's a ton of things to make it more difficult, but it's at the end of the day, it's whatever the developer wants it to be. Essentially.
Would that be more fun? Obviously I can't say because that game doesn't exist, but I'm leaning towards no in this case. Here's why. To me, difficulty wouldn't add much, if anything, to this experience. As I said earlier, the reason I enjoy this game so much is because of the set pieces, the wacky abilities, and just getting to experience all of these wonderful stages. In fact, you could compare this directly to Xenoblade X and its difficulty to get an idea of why difficulty works there, but not here. X is a game about the last remnants of humanity surviving on a hostile world. Kirby is a game about a gluttonous pink ball that just happens to be one of the most powerful beings in the universe. High difficulty wouldn't tell a story here like it does in Xenoblade, since Kirby in the lore of the game isn't struggling, he's goofing around and having a good time. I mean, just look at this dude. Does this look like someone desperately battling in a fight?
But could you imagine a Kirby game that was like Elden Ring? All right, that actually sounds pretty sick, right? It'd be like a different target audience, obviously, but could a Kirby game exist like that and it be like both difficult and fun? Probably.
For their life, so I think I can pretty comfortably say that in this specific case, difficulty probably wouldn't make the game better. But Kirby is only one game of the three. Next, let's look at another game that, once again, didn't provide much of a challenge to me personally. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is an interesting case, since I actually already did—
What was it? I would use Spider-Man music here, but those songs are published by UMG, and those motherfuckers, a bear I want to poke. And that is not a bear I want to poke. Yeah, fuck that.
This test a few years ago by accident. After I lost all of my save data on my original PS4 in 2019, I figured I might as well replay Spider-Man since I hadn't done everything in the post-game yet. This time though, I played the game on a slightly higher difficulty than before just to mix things up, and what I found surprised me a fair bit. First, some context. I don't want to say this, but I think you know I kinda have to. So here goes. This game—
It's contextual around your own skill around the game. It's contextual that you've already played the game before, you know the underlying mechanics, you know a lot of the fights, you know the systems, and you're just doing it to like challenge yourself a little bit.
makes you feel like Spider-Man.
Oh.
Look, it's the most generic line in the world, but in this case it really is true. However, I'd like to go a bit in depth on why that's the case. It all comes down to flow. Spider-Man in this game is astonishingly powerful. You can dodge very fast-moving airborne projectiles made of lead that I will not name because I don't want YouTube to obliterate my channel. You can grab rockets out of the air, and you can swing a manhole cover around to definitely not do any serious harm to anyone. He'll be
Oh, wow. Does Spider-Man kill people? Or is he like Batman, like he never kills people?
fine, don't worry. What makes combat in this game so fun is your ability to constantly stay just one step ahead. You're just too quick to get hit by these enemies that are seemingly moving in slow motion. The exhilarating feeling you get as you dance around these guys while your character in game seems to be having just as much fun as you are is something that very few games are able to provide. As I play this game, I find that I don't often think very much. I'm not methodically planning out how I'm going to attack each enemy, what skills I'll use, and in which order I'll prioritize my targets. I'm instead moving based on reactions, going with the flow, and adapting to whatever the game throws at me. And
usually that level that you're playing at usually comes from the fact that you have a good understanding of the game and what you can do in any given moment already. To a new player, they can't do that, though. Like, a new player is just like rolling around, slamming buttons, trying to just do stuff and just trying to figure it out, right? Eventually there comes a point where, you know, you have like all of your moves memorized. You know, like what you need to do to like disarm an enemy, make him vulnerable, pop him up, juggle him a little bit, grab some stuff and do whatever. All right. That evolution of your own skill development happens, but it doesn't happen on like it doesn't happen in like the first hour of you playing the game.
all of this only works thanks to one simple mechanic that perfectly fits with the narrative of the game: Spidey Sense. This acts as an early warning system that lets both Spider-Man and the player know when something bad is going to happen, and this is a large part of that one step ahead feeling I mentioned earlier. However, there do exist situations where a higher level of difficulty would be beneficial, and this is something that I noticed in that second playthrough. There are encounters in the story where Peter is genuinely struggling, and so it's nice to actually feel that in the gameplay as well. Spider-Man is strong, but he's not the apex of the universe like Kirby is. He does face genuine resistance at a lot of points. In fact, a large part of his character is that constant struggle and loss. So you've got two different halves here. One half is this exciting, flashy combat that neither you nor the character is taking super seriously, while the other is the fundamental struggle that comes with facing these sometimes city-destroying forces. That contrast is a ton of fun. However, it really complicates the problem of, will difficulty make this game better?
And also, like, how do you define difficulty? Like, in my own experience in playing games, what ends up happening a lot of the time is just to make the game feel more difficult. Is the developer just adds, like, gives the enemies more health, and then they give the enemies more health. They make the enemies deal more damage, and reaction wise, they make the game able to read your inputs. So it doesn't feel as organic of like a fight. Like if you're trying to do something and the enemy can like counter it in some way, they do it like instantly the moment you press a button, and you can tell that if the game has that like button read system in there. I find it like very like frustrating because like a lot of the games I used to play with or play in the past had stuff like that, like namely like fighting games, and it was just like ultimately a 50-50 on whether or not the move would hit. It's like, oh, I did this skillful combo, but because the enemy read my buttons and knows exactly what I'm gonna do, it just blocked. But then I do that same thing again. It's like, oh, it hit. Um, seldom or seldom do games actually upon like like increasing the difficult, do they actually implement like different mechanics? Because I think what ends up happening is the more like mechanics an enemy has, people feel that like that's part of like the core game, right? Like so like if you fight an enemy on easy, it could only have like one or two moves, but if you face that same enemy at a higher difficulty, all of a sudden they have like an extra like one or two moves, bringing the like the move pool to like a 4 or 5 or something. But you ask one person, oh, is because that they played on a higher difficulty, does that mean the people that played on the easier difficulty got like a completely different experience? Well, I mean, they're gonna answer either yes or no, but I don't know. It's some people feel that like if an enemy has more moves, that's just content like about the game that they're not getting. And I could easily understand like why somebody would feel gypped playing a game on like just normal versus like at a higher difficulty or whatever.
Because here, I think the answer is both yes and no at the same time. You see, in my first playthrough, I felt that ludonarrative harmony when fighting, swinging around the city, and just playing the game in general. Yet hints of dissonance began to creep in on the more over-the-top and cinematic fights. I then faced the opposite problem in my second playthrough, where those dramatic fights felt perfect, but Spider-Man, the guy who can stop a moving train and grab helicopters out of the sky, getting KO'd by a random grunt's right hook, felt a little off. In
Yeah.
spite of this, Spider-Man actually gets us much closer to answering that question, and I think everything will become clear when we take a look at the final game, Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom is one of the best video games ever made. There's no real denying that fact. The difficulty of this game, however, is a bit less defined. Part of what I love about Tears is how dynamic its difficulty is. Let me give you an example. This is an overworld boss. It's a walking campsite with bokoblins riding on it. While it can be a bit tricky, there are plenty of ways to get through this encounter. One option is simply sprinting straight up to the boss and using your ascend ability to jump through the floor and attack the enemies on top. You could also light some grass on fire and use the updraft to launch yourself into the air and shoot some arrows, or descend down onto the platforms. And if you're feeling really creative, you might choose to recreate the GD0950 Hresvelg, attach cannons to it, and rain down fire from the skies. You've got a lot of options in Tears of the Kingdom. The single biggest reason
That's
this
pretty
game
cool.
isn't difficult isn't necessarily because of the things you can create or the options available to you in the combat. Granted, those are a large part of it, but they alone wouldn't make this combat easy. It's thanks to the ability to pause the game and fully heal yourself that basically nothing in the game can kill you if you don't already want to die. It's when we journey into the depths, however, that sense of ludonarrative harmony in Tears of the Kingdom becomes especially apparent. Tears is actually a rare sequel in the Zelda series. This Link that we're playing as has already explored the surface of Hyrule. None of this is new to him. Naturally then, while this game does have some new tricks here and there, the surface should be easier, more familiar, and comfortable. When the game starts though, these enormous chasms open up, revealing a new world completely unknown to both us as players and the characters in the game. A world covered in the very same thing that constitutes the final boss of the previous game that so easily decimated Hyrule 100 years ago. A world where you can even see the ghosts of the fallen soldiers from the previous game's events. This place isn't merely uncharted territory, it's enemy territory. story. Hyrule is quite literally Zelda's land, and Link is Zelda's knight. The depths, on the other hand, belong to Ganondorf, and that's genuinely how this place feels. It's dark, oppressive, and overwhelming in scale. This is where the game becomes genuinely challenging. You see, Nintendo made a really clever decision here. They decided to add a debuff to the game called Gloom that reduces your max number of hearts. This way, even if you pause the game to heal, you'll never get back up to full health. Adding on to this is the fact that unless you have special curatives that are relatively rare, the only way to restore this debuff is by leaving the underground and returning to the surface. Finally, to complete this nightmare—
God damn, I'm just looking at this game because I don't own like a Nintendo or whatever, like a Switch, so I never played any of this stuff. The more I like see this type of gameplay and like the increasing health and all the little actions, the mini map, the world, I'm like, Zelda is literally just Nintendo's Elden Ring. They need to like lean more into this.
combo, there are two methods by which you obtain Gloom. First, the black and red substance all over the ground here that shares the same name will begin to gradually lower your max health if you stand on it for too long. And second, the enemies here will inflict Gloom with each hit. All of this together make the depths genuinely threatening and hostile. They're almost like the planet Mira in Xenoblade X. However, above ground is closer to Kirby. It's as though both worlds, and crucially both levels of difficulty, exist at the same time. Within this lies the fact that ties this whole idea together. We've been asking the wrong question.
Does difficulty make games better? When does difficulty make games better? Well, here's the title of the video. When does difficulty make games better? When you got like a good understanding of the game. That's when you want it to get a little more difficult.
I'm not a game designer, so obviously I can't teach you about how to, well, design a game, but I am a video editor. I can tell you that video editing, perhaps much like game design, is all about using the correct tools for the job. I could add a million flashy transitions and sound effects to every video, though as the great and wise Professor Oak once said, there's a time and place for everything. I think game design is similar. Speaking from a player's perspective, a game could be crazy difficult, yet what matters to me is less about how difficult the game is and more about why it's so challenging. What feeling were the devs trying to convey? How powerful or weak am I supposed to feel? The reason I was able to enjoy these games in spite of their lack of challenge was the fact that their level of difficulty matched the feelings they were trying to convey. Kirby's lack of difficulty added to the lighthearted, whimsical atmosphere of the game. Spider-Man's allowed me to truly experience what it might be like to don the mask and swing around in New York City for a bit. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, the challenge in Xenoblade X forced me to truly understand just how dangerous the planet Mira was firsthand.
So wait, is it like the more family-friendly, kind of childlike the game appears, the less difficult it is, but the more realistic a game looks, the more difficult it will appear and also like just be flat out? I mean, that kind of feels like the vibe of it I'm getting. I mean, there's like obviously some outliers. You know, you have something like Celeste that like looks like a kid's game but is notoriously like pretty difficult, right? I think I would probably agree with that.
Seemingly impossible climb of Celeste perfectly represented the seemingly impossible mental trials that the main character had to overcome. So does difficulty actually make games better? Yes, it does. Or perhaps a better way to say it is, difficulty can make games better. But it does not exist as a catch-all solution. It's not a magical wonder mechanic that instantly improves any game. It, much like everything else, is a tool. One that, if used in the correct amount, can create experiences and feelings that only this medium can provide. But crucially, one that's not always necessary.
Hey, dang.
After playing Celeste,
so come here. I think that's a pretty good video. When does it become a problem? I mean, obviously, if a game tries to like put itself off as like a really tough game like too early, I mean that's gonna turn a lot of people off. I mean, you obviously want to take into consideration you have like your core player base that's going to play the game, or like if you're doing like a sequel game versus like a brand new game that you have like no one knows anything about, and you're trying to like invite people into like your world and, you know, retain them as players. Like if a game comes off and it's like too difficult too quick, obviously that's going to like turn off a lot of like people. But I mean, I think you answered the question pretty thoroughly, my man. What is everyone feeling in here? Like, I like when difficulty does not just make the enemy have more HP and hit harder. Yeah. But also introduce new moveset and mechanics. I mean, yeah, but you know, I don't really think developers are like into that concept of you know, making mechanics and moves only to be gate kept by a difficulty. Um like because conventionally most people that play any game are going to be casual people. Casual people are, like, just statistically do not increase difficulty. Like, they only play on like easy or normal. That's what most people do. So if you're gonna gatekeep some aspects of a game by the difficulty, it's like, oh, you want to see have like a different experience, or like a different have the enemies have like different move sets, and you want me to like increase difficulty. Um, like the person that's playing on normal can feel like gypped. If like a game does something like that, so I get it, but I mean that's just something that I would like, you know, because if I'm gonna play like New Game Plus or play the game over again on like a new difficulty, um, and I like the game, it's like, oh wow, there's just more good stuff to play, right? I mean, that's what I would like, but there's not a lot of games that like do that. Most of the time, it's just like more HP, hit harder. That's it, and then potentially just like button read your shit. Difficulty is good when I can beat it, but bad when I can't. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. Um, all the most difficult games in the world are meant to be beaten. That's what it is. If you beat a game, it's because the developer made it so you could beat the game. um, yeah, but yeah, overall, awesome video, dude, for sure. Um, and I think that's like a good question to like keep into context as like more and more games come out, because like this can transcend like many different genres of games, not just like your action adventure type of game or anything like that. You know, fighting games are going through this whole like modern day thing of like casualization of fighting games. Shooting games are going through have been going through a bunch of shit, like, you know, implementing crossplay and aim assist and all that other bullshit. Um, yeah, it's a thing that transcends all genres of games. So it's good that you made a video like this, man, for sure. But other than that, good stuff, and I'm a fan now. So yeah, keep it up, dude. Other than that, that's it for me. I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, later.